and welcome to a new edition of Games and Names. As you can easily guess, our sport for this episode is the great sport of squash, a sport that has a big story of success for Egypt. Our guest for this episode is the head coach of the Heliopolis Sporting Club, one of the most successful clubs in the most successful sport in Egypt's squash. So let's get to know Coach Ahmed Kharitam and get to know more about squash and the story of success. And with us now is Coach Ahmed Kharitam, and he is the head coach of the Heliopolis Squash Sporting Club team. Thank you, Coach, for being with us. When we talk about squash in Egypt, it's a story of success. So walk us through, first of all, through that story of success from your eyes, and you've been in the field for nearly, 30 years maybe now.
First thing, welcome to Heliopolis Club and squash courts. Yes, I have the proud to be a part of this story of history in squash in Egypt. I'm an ex-professional player. I was a junior and have the pleasure to be the first generation who made the revolution of the Egyptian squash in the world. And we began like 1990. Start to achieve some titles in the British Open, Junior Open. This is the most prestigious tournament in the world and very old tournament.
Now, you led the way, as I understand, and you reached the semi-final of the British Open in the juniors in an unprecedented achievement for Egyptian squash. Talk to me about that achievement and your generation. And we all know the names, but we want everybody to remember those great names.
Yeah, in that time, Egypt wasn't achieve any titles in juniors, especially. We had great names in professional and amateurs champions, such like Gamal Awad, Magdi Saad, a lot of the big names. But in juniors, it was the first time that we succeed to make something like this in semi-final. It was under 14, and then every year it grows up like snowball. Like Barada comes and Omar Borlosi and a lot of players. And in 1994 we achieved the first Junior World Open for teams and individual in New Zealand, and it was the first Egyptian team to win this title in our history.
Amir Wagih was also one of the biggest names. So talk to us about his achievement, and I think he came from here.
Yeah, sure. Amir, one of the greatest players in Egypt at all times, and he is the most professional coach in Egypt, very famous in Egypt and outside Egypt, and he's an international coach. And he, by the way, he was our coach in 1994, and he was playing in a professional team and the men team, and at the same time he was our coach with Mr. Abbas Qaoud. He was a head coach in that days. And he kept like a head coach of juniors and for men and women for a long time. And he's such a great person, yeah.
Indeed, and such a big role he did play. And then walk us through the generation of Karim Darwish and the other big names.
Yeah. As I said before, like it goes like
snowball effect.
Yeah. And Karim Darwish, Amr Shabana, Wael Hatem, Muhammad Abbas, and goes with the champions until we reach now to Ali Farag and Ranim El Wilaili and Noor Al Tayyib and Omar Mosad and Karim Abgawad, a lot of names.
And now that there are so many names that maybe we will forget some of them, and again, that was the story of success. So why is it that we succeeded in squash in Egypt in achieving such international fame while we failed in many other sports? I'm not saying that the other sports, like we have also achieved in handball, in speedball, and in other sports as well, but squash started everything. So what's the secret behind this game, the Egyptian secret?
My opinion is a lot of factors. First thing, this individual game. It's easier than the teams like basketball and football and something like that. Second thing, it's science. It doesn't affect directly in the tournament, not yet. Not the other sports. But until now, we are counting on our talent, our experience, and because the third factor was we had a legacy in Egypt since 30s and 40s. Tawfiq Shafi, Ibrahim Amin, Fattah Basha Amr. We've been in squash from generations. So we have the history. It's individual games, so it's count on the player and the parents with the association or with the clubs, and that gives the players a lot of preparations and all what he need to go through it. He doesn't
Yeah.
stuck with government and payments and something like that.
And I guess in like 20 or 30 years ago, or maybe more, people only started squash maybe while they were 10 years or 12 years, or I don't know. But now we're seeing boys and girls starting at the ages of 6 and maybe 5 and 4 as well. So I guess this gives a boost and a lot of advantages.
Yes, we usually nowadays we start to play teach squash like from 5 to 7 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. So from the point of view of a coach, what are the qualities needed in a squash player? Of course, every sport might need different qualifications than the other. The athlete might have different talents. I'm talking here about the body, the speed, the power, and so on. So what does it take for an athlete to be successful in squash? What do you look for in boys and girls, in young boys?
Reflex, it's the most important thing in squash. So you have to think fast and to react faster. so this is the quality of squash, because it have a lot of factors in all the sports. So you have to be speed, strong, stamina, elastic, like every sport.
Foot movement.
Foot movement, but the most important that think fast and to react faster.
Oh, great. So, are you seeing an evolution in the game itself? Is the game changing? Like, for instance, if we talk about football, definitely football, the world's most popular sport, is different in 2019 than it was in 1990. And that is very much different to the 1950s or the 1930s. So, is squash changing, and in which what are the changes occurring in your sport?
Yeah, of course, it's changing by time, and the rules is updated every now and then. Of course, there's our basics, but it's a lot of updates to make the game faster and not boring for the audience and for the players and everything. So we had a lot of change, like scoring. We used to, like, English scoring was 9 points, and it was serve and chin serve. And after a while, it turned to 15 points, and without a change in serve. And then we now playing like 11 points without a change in serve, and we the 10 the below part of the front wall change the heights. Every this changing, like, for more speed and for more updates to make the game faster and alive and active. Yeah.
Okay. And Coach Khiretam, if we talk now about the upcoming young stars that you have here in Heliopolis and in Egypt overall, talk to us about their names, their achievements.
Of course, we have a group of very talented players in our club here, such like Ahmed Walid, Diko, and Salman, Ismail Sharif, Malik, Blal. A lot of names coming through and goes to the world of squash. For example, we have like Diko Ahmed Walid. He's the first player in the world who won the title of the Egyptian, for the British Open under 11. So it was a great achievement. And a lot of players.
So we have now promising stars that might repeat the achievement of the great names that we had in our sport.
Yes, we are trying to rebuild our team here to make more of success and to lead the local league of Egypt and to lead the world in squash, as we are Egyptian, the first generation in squash now.
Yes. Which teams, which clubs compete with you in the local arena?
Actually, the competition is very tough now in Egypt because Egypt is the top level of squash in the world, so it's very tough and getting stronger, tougher year on year. Now we have a lot of competitors like Wadi Degla and Al Ahli Club, Black Ball Club. A lot of clubs now, and we are going to begin our local season next month in August, and I hope we can success to compete hard and to achieve a lot of good things for Heliopolis. Yeah.
Right. Which sports go in tandem with squash? For instance, I mean, you have one of your players is playing squash. If he is, do you advise him or her not to play any other sports, or do you allow them to play other sports? And which sports would you allow if you do that?
Of course, they can play other sports, but not as a professional. They
not in competition style.
Not in competition style. Swimming actually it's very good to play it with a squash, and aerobics is also very good, and it helps the players in the court and to prevent his squash level.
I wonder. It always comes to the mind. Especially of us here in Egypt, because we want Olympic medals. Why isn't squash an Olympic sport? And I'm sure that you think about this every day. If I was in the sport, I would think about this every hour, because if squash becomes an Olympic sport, then we have guaranteed medals, golds.
For sure, if we're going to be on Olympic Games, Egypt will achieve a lot of.
So why isn't it an Olympic sport?
I don't know exactly. We like the last two Olympic championships. We went to the short list for
new sports to be added.
To new sports to be added, and at the last minute they choose another game. For mom, it's politics. It's we need like big countries like USA, Russia to support this game more than us, because the leader now is Egypt. It's only Egypt who are defeating about the squash and to push
So what are we doing here to push for that?
There's an international file, and the Egyptian Association with cooperation with the World Squash Federation are every year like making a promotion for squash, going to spread squash in a lot of country, in a new country to play squash. Like this year they go to Mauritius to invent squash courts and make tournaments there, and they go every place in the world and make a lot of marketing and promotion to promote for squash to be in Olympics. So they do a lot of effort. Yeah.
So Coach Ahmed, we are exporting squash now, I guess. So what about the money involved in the sport? Also a question that has come to the mind of viewers throughout the years. Squash is a racket sport, so is tennis, so is ping pong, and so on. But why is the money in squash, yes, it has improved over the years, but why is it much less, for instance, than tennis?
Nowadays it's not much less than tennis now, because technology of rackets and expenses of a professional player.
I'm talking about the prizes and international.
The prize, yeah, because there is no a lot of sponsors or big sponsors like tennis. You know, tennis is it's an older game for the history, and a lot of courts and spread a lot than squash. So it got like a lot of sponsorship, a lot of money.
Coach Ahmed, let me ask another question. If you are one of the top 10 players in the world in squash, will you be rich?
I think nowadays you can be rich, but not the same like a tennis player or a football player or something like that.
But you will be rich. Not only live a good life, you'll be rich. If you're one of the top 10, or will you just live a good life?
It's a good life, yeah, and it's getting better, because nowadays, in this decade, we start to see squash players make an ads for a sponsor.
They deserve it.
That's for us. It's the first time. Before it wasn't.
They deserve it.
Yeah.
That was all for Games and Names. We hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have. Until we meet again, same time next week, have all the best and goodbye.